Okay, we're going to kick off with a question to Anthony that's just basically helping everyone here get on the same page. What are indigenous trees? What are we talking about when we're talking about endemic trees? What are their uses? Why are we so obsessed with them?
Well, thank you, Harry, and thank you for inviting us for this session on indigenous trees, which are going to be increasingly important. They're going to be increasingly important as we go into the future, and especially for our young people here. If you can get into that groove, get into that the act, then I think we have a good future for us. Indigenous trees are the trees which were originally part of this environment. In other words, trees which don't come from anywhere else. And you'd be surprised how many trees we have around us which come from outside this country, including many of the palms which you can see around you. Trees like, trees which we know and love. Trees like neem trees, which we all know about, come from from somewhere else. They were not naturally here. It doesn't mean they are bad, but I think we want to also, in fact, they have been very, very useful, and that's why they have lasted. But I think we now need to pay more attention to our own trees, the indigenous trees which are found here. And there are a number of reasons for this. I won't sort of go into very boring monologue. The first one, which I think is important, is a question since time immemorial. So they are part of us. And this element of heritage is important because the more indigenous trees we are losing, forests and all that, have completely disappeared, and people don't know what it really looked like. They don't know what kind of species that their heritage consists of. So that element is important. We'd like to retain our heritage. That's a very important value. The other thing is the benefits. Many indigenous trees have a number of benefits, whether it is medicinal, whether it is decorative, ornamental. Like we have very beautiful indigenous ornamental trees, which people aren't aware of, but they need to really get to know about. So the practical, beneficial part of it is very important as well. That's another reason for growing indigenous trees. The other one is that the coastal environment, the coast here, is ideal for growing trees. And when you compare that to growing other crops, trees come out on top. They survive well. And if you look at the historical record, you'll find that originally most of this area where we are was actually forest or woodlands. So it means that they do well. They did well, and if we go back to harvesting or go back to maintaining indigenous trees, then we're definitely going to win because it is it's really their place here at the coast. The last one is that many of them are now being lost at a very fast rate. They're being lost because of the infrastructure we're building, the roads we're building, the towns we're building, the dams. You know, we're clearing a lot of the farms. So we're clearing a lot of forests. And this I must point again, it's not that we're bad, it's not that we're kind of villains, but it's just the way progress is and development is. So we're losing a lot of these indigenous trees, and we need to find out ways of slowing down this loss and increasing the number of indigenous trees that we have. Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm really intrigued. Let's do a quick round of our favourite indigenous trees. I'm going to kick us off, the sausage tree. the shapely fruit, the gentle hanging of the fruit. Anyway, Norbs?
I would say maybe a mvule tree. That's a pretty good indigenous tree we have.
Okay, I would say the Lua tree. That is a tree with very fragrant flowers, which has been around for a while.
Harry must have copied me. Yeah, previously my favorite indigenous tree was Mvule, but nowadays I'm feeling homesick, and being a person from Rima, my favorite tree currently is Kigeli africana, or the sausage tree. Where I come from, we call it Muratina tree. You understand why? Yeah, it makes our traditional local brew, which is used in all traditional ceremonies. So it's kind of close to my heart.
Okay, I would have to go with Adansonia digitata, or the baobab. It's just a beautiful tree, and I also love it because of the cultural significance it has, not only now but also in the past. It played a very important role when it came to the struggle for independence. I also love it because of its ecological importance. It supports biodiversity a lot, so that's a plus, as well as its economic value. And I believe all of us here, we love Mabuyu because I love them so much.
I will go with Mvule because it's a nice.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but I think I would go with Bamba Coffee. I have a nice relationship with that tree.
Pod mahogany, beautiful, yeah. So on the flip side of all the indigenous trees, we have the devil's spawn that are exotic, non-native, naturalized. Tell us about them, Norbs. This is our one rant for the day.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect me to do any ranting, would you? Okay, so exotics, that is what we unfortunately have a lot of here in Kilifi. They're the species which were brought from outside. They're not native, they are not indigenous, they've come from outside the country or outside the environment that we have here. So you can divide them into just an exotic is any species which has come from outside. Species which then are called naturalized are things like the neem, which have grown here and been able to breed here and have basically become part of the flora that we have. A lot of people think that neems are indigenous. They even call them Mkilifi because they have grown up with them and never know that they actually came from India and Southeast Asia. And then there's the next level of devil spawn, as Harry put it, which are trees or species, not just plants, just all animals. You can have any group of organism can be invasive, and invasive species are those which are taking over. They're so successful in the new environment that they've come into that they are taking over from the indigenous, the natural occurring species. So neem indeed is one of those. We have about 4 very severe invasives in Kilifi. 2 of them are actually on the list of 100 most invasive species in the world. That is Lantana camara and Lucina leucocephala, which are both terrible invasives in that they take over they can take over whole swathes of natural habitat. Even this macamba that you see hanging down from the neem tree, and even the neem itself, they're invasives as well. So we have a big problem. Invasive species are the number 3 driver of natural biodiversity loss. And biodiversity is what it's all about. If we have a good biodiverse environment, then everything, the plants that were here before. If we have those, then insects can live off those, and all the other critters, all the other animals, the whole food web, the whole circle of life is based on plants. And if we have the natural plants that were here before, still here, then, or coming back, if we put them back, then we can build up on that natural biodiversity again, and that is what we really want.
Thanks, Nod. Yeah, I always find it really interesting that everyone can kind of agree Indian house crows are a big issue, but then we're surrounded by Indian trees, so everyone's like, oh no, they're lovely. Okay, over to you, Matteo. Obviously, you come from like more of a commercial forestry sort of background, and forestry is obviously a key part of the indigenous tree movement. Where does forestry come into things, and where do non-native species kind of fit within that?
Yeah, thanks, Harry. So, I mean, Anthony has spoken about the large-scale destruction of ecosystems that we've seen in East Africa in the past, maybe, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, getting really bad in the past 20 years. And a lot of that comes as a result of people needing things, fuel, building material and stuff like that. I mean, just to put it in perspective, between Tanzania, Kenya and Uganda, last year, something like 600,000 tons of mabatis have been produced and sold. That if you lay them down on the ground, it's something like 90 square kilometers. It's a massive amount of space. And every year that increases. It's been going up, and it'll keep going up. So take for example that, and you say, how do you support all of these mabatis that get installed? And historically, it's been indigenous trees. So people just going to the forest, getting some timber and putting up their houses. At more industrial levels, you have steel trusses. So now the question is, how do we build roofs in a more sustainable way? We can't keep cutting indigenous forests. There simply isn't enough left. And it wasn't a great idea in the first place. And even steel as well. Steel is a very carbon-heavy product. It carries a lot of emissions embodied in it. It travels very long distances. It's not great from an environmental perspective either. So forestry can offer a solution there. And yes, exotic and species can become invasive, and they need to be controlled. But I believe there is a space for them where they can come and solve problems that we have in our economies, in our ecosystems, and done it controlledly. It's actually possible. So the objective of commercial forestry would be to create those products in a sustainable way and displace those that aren't sustainable. So and do that in the most efficient way possible. And just like we've done with agriculture, we went from picking berries in the forest to doing agriculture. The same thing can be done for trees, and that actually has a positive impact on the rest of the ecosystem. So there's a way you can utilize smaller pieces of land for productive areas, and that unlocks more land for more conservation area.
Yeah, thanks, Matteo. Over to you, Caro. Obviously, so much of Leaf's work is with communities, and given they own so much of the land in Kilifi County, like what's their kind of role in this movement? How can we get them more involved, and what do you think the hurdles are to kind of restoring all that agricultural land that's largely useless?
Yeah, thank you so much, Harry. I think the local communities play a very key role in this movement of indigenous tree species, because one, they are the custodians of these local ecosystems. So they've been there, they interact with the daily challenges directly, firsthand. So they are very key. And also you find that the local communities possess a lot of knowledge, the local knowledge. In this movement, I like to say that the local communities are not just the beneficiaries, they are the drivers of change. So they play a role in that, using that local knowledge that they have, it can be passed from one generation to another. you will be surprised when, even in our work, when we visit the local communities, how much they know when it comes to the species, the uses, the traditional uses and all that. And so I think that's a very important point, because if we can create awareness and also learn from them, then I think this movement can move far. They are the people, the local communities are the people who can either cause harm, as Matteo was saying, and they are also the people who have the power to create these changes. So they are the people who are going to plant these indigenous tree species. They are the people who are going to nurture them, ensuring that they grow. And they are also the people who are going to be the best people when it comes to advocacy. So the local communities, they need all the support they can get. And also we just need to listen to them. They have a lot that they can offer. Yeah, so thank you.
Amazing, yeah. Kudos. I think for a lot of people, like the tree planting movement, I mean, for some people it's just a joke, and a lot of other people think it's simple. And I think everyone here knows it's far from simple. Like, Winnie, what do you think the main struggle is for us, and what are the kind of challenges that we need to overcome to really get this movement going?
To begin with, I think the biggest problem we have in this movement is climate change and biodiversity loss. And looking at the root cause of it, it's all anthropogenic. So knowing that we are the problem. And one sad thing to say is nature can thrive without us. Nature doesn't need human beings to be there for it to thrive. So having that in mind, we have to be more careful about how we run things. So when we think of climate change and the problems it brings to our movement, we find like currently in Kilifi, the rains have been terrible. The rain patterns have been irregular. You want to plant trees, you want to do all this restoration work, but you can't. It's either you'll do irrigation for your trees, but if you're doing large-scale restoration, it's gonna be hard, and it's not also efficient or sustainable at the end of the day. The other thing is, with the local communities, the biggest challenge with restoration or pushing forward our agenda in terms of taking care of indigenous trees, bringing them back, is livelihoods. So you want to get the community to plant trees, to spend more time doing all this restoration work. However, the one thing that is on their mind is, I need food for my family. Well, when I talk about the community, I get kind of emotional. Yes. So we really need to closely work with the community, put ourselves in their shoes, understand that in as much as they are drivers to degradation, they are part of the problem, they also have a problem they need to resolve. So as Carol said, we need to listen to them, we need to work closely with them, and as we work with them, we need to really put ourselves in their position and think the way they would, so that we can be able to overcome these challenges. I think the other challenge, one of the big challenges we also have, I think it's the lack of transfer of knowledge from our forefathers to the current generation. So, like, if I were to be taken back to the highlands where I come from, if I'm told to name indigenous trees, I think I'd name probably 5, because that knowledge has not been passed down to me from my parents and from their parents. So I think the lack of knowledge has been a big challenge. Even in since we started, we wrote an opinion article for UN Decade of Restoration about the overcoming challenges to propagation of indigenous trees. And you see there's a lot of lack of information out there. you want to plant a tree, you have to optimize a protocol for germination. You also have to optimize a protocol for planting it, for growing it. So the lack of knowledge is also one of the big challenges. And the way to overcome it is for us who've been working there, especially people like Norbert, Anthony, people who've been in the field for quite a long time, sharing this knowledge, putting it out there so that it's easily accessible and people can use this knowledge to make actual changes. Thank you.
Yeah, knowledge sharing, obviously, absolutely key. We're actually not very good at it ourselves either, so something to work on. But what else do you think we as a panel need to start doing better to really get this movement going? Does anyone have any ideas? Anthony?
I think Winkate's pointed out a number of key points. I think what she's talked about, transferring this knowledge to the next generation, is particularly important. But also getting people interested in their trees, and I'd like to commend in the last 3 or 4 years. I'd like to commend the Botanic Gardens Conservation International, and also working with LEAF and other organizations, because part of the approach they've used is getting people to go out. It's like training. You go out, identify their trees in the forest, and in many cases it's not as if they don't know those trees. They actually know them. But there's some kind of exchange, some kind of interaction, because they'll tell you, we call this tree this. This is the name we have for it. And we also note that. And then learning together, I think we're also learning. This is what Winnie was talking about, protocols. We're also learning, how do you collect those seeds? How do you store the seed? How do you plant them so that the seedling survives? So it's a process which, for me, has been very, it's been an eye-opener, and it's been very gratifying. And I hope that it continues. And even if that particular project ends, I hope there will be people within the communities, because these are people who live out there, who will be able to tell you, yes, these are the trees we have. This is what we do. This is how we plant them. And further to what I've said, some of them actually now have their nurseries from their own efforts, going to the forest, getting seed, planting them. They have their own nurseries. So they're fully informed about producing indigenous seedlings and growing them. And the issue now is people outside. The issue now is people like us, whether we're interested in buying those seedlings. So we also have to grow interest in indigenous trees, indigenous seedlings. Currently, the main buyers are corporates, companies, NGOs who have some program which they have, okay, we need to plant indigenous trees, so they buy those indigenous trees. But until it is people like you and me to go and say, okay, I want to plant a sausage tree in my garden, or I want to plant a amloa tree in my garden, until we, who are the majority, kind of get into that way of thinking, we still have a long way to go. But I think it has started, and I must say it's very encouraging.
Yeah, no worries.
Just wanted to add to that. We're in a country where the president has asked us as a population to plant 15 billion trees in 10 years or whatever it is. And down to the local level, there's always these tree planting drives and school tree planting, whatever. But never, ever is that there are mention of which kind of trees. And the only trees that are ever available for all these thousands of tree planters to plant, if they go and look in nurseries, are exotics. And until it comes from the very top that the trees that we need to be planting are the trees that belong, the trees that were here before, the indigenous trees, and the process gets started for that to be for that to be possible from those big government agencies like KEFRI and KFS. Until that starts, we are actually not going to go anywhere with those kind of figures and those kind of aims.
Yeah, thanks, Nob. Yeah, Karen.
I also wanted to add to what Norbert and Anthony are saying. I think what we can do is also have policies that are specific to the indigenous tree species. There are a lot of policies, but I've not heard of any that speaks about the conservation of these indigenous tree species. So we need to have those policies and ensure that they are implemented, because that's one of the biggest challenge we have in the country. We have a lot of policies, but at the end of the day, they just remain a written document. Nothing is done about it. So policy development and implementation.
Yeah, I agree with what my colleagues have said. I would just add that then it's also on our part and on the part of the nurseries and to make it also easier for people like you guys to choose indigenous, choose the right tree for the specific purpose, and choose indigenous whenever possible. And that comes from also a place of being able to produce and bring those seedlings at an affordable price to everyone. Unfortunately, right now, as Norbert was saying, you go to a nursery and you'll only find exotic trees. So as a consumer, it's very hard to make the right call. So it's, I think, on our part to try and make it easier, affordable, and more accessible to plant indigenous.
Yeah, nice one, guys. So call to action. If you're taking part in these silly tree planting schemes, please choose Indigenous. And the Leaf Nursery and Norbert's Nursery have tried to make this easier for you today by bringing a lot of free trees. And you're allowed to take one free tree home with you, care for it with your life. You'll see them dotted around the place. Now, some of you probably have been to Kitten Indigenous Tree Forest on the plantation. Our movement is often bleak. I don't want to sugarcoat it. But if there was ever a source of optimism, it is this little 4-acre patch of forest which Moses and Norbert have been working on with blood, sweat and tears for the last 10 years. 9. Moses, tell us, what's it been like watching the Kitten Forest grow?
It's amazing. It's amazing plant. We have to plant indigenous trees in our area, which it will produce amazing area, which without planting, will make a place very dry.
I just wanted to add to that. If anyone has been to Kivukoni Indigenous Tree Nursery and its surrounding restoration site, it's 9 or 10 years ago it was sisal. It was a sisal field, and now we've got a forest with several hundred species of trees and shrubs growing there, and so many birds and butterflies and bees and, dare I say it, snakes. And everything else has moved in. Not so many crows, actually. Less crows than you might expect elsewhere. Anyway, it's lovely to see, and anyone is welcome there. The gate's always open, so do come by and see what is possible in a very short time. And it's largely thanks to Moses and my team that we've achieved that. Thanks. Directions to get there. It's about 400 meters from the school gate. Just keep going. There's a little sign on the left that says Kivukoni Indigenous Tree Nursery. And it's actually the bit of forest that you see on the side of the road.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an easy time to be a conservationist, losing something like 38,000 football pitches of forest every day. But what are the things that get us up in the morning? How do we keep going? What are our sources of optimism?
Just seeing all that biodiversity coming back, that's what gets me. Biodiversity is my word.
The thing is because the diversity of trees at the coast, just for your information, the coast is one of the most diverse areas in terms of plants in the whole country. So it's been estimated that of the over 6,000 species of plants which have been listed or noted in the country, a bit less than half are found in this region of the coast. So you can see much of the biodiversity heritage of the country is in the coast. We are the most diverse area in the country. And what drives me is to being conscious of this and wanting more people to know about this and to be proud of it and to try and open our eyes to this really great wealth in natural resources. That's what keeps us going.
To be optimistic with such realities sometimes can be hard, especially when you're doing so much work to help do some restoration or bring some positive change. However, what keeps me optimistic is seeing the little changes that have happened so far. So, for the past 4 years that I've been working with the LEAF and working closely with the community, even with school kids, listening to their change in mindset towards the forests, the knowledge build up on indigenous trees, and also the change of perspective. Kaya forests are generally feared by the local communities. They are not a sight to behold, even if they are good places. So seeing that positive change without the need to destroy the forest, because sometimes fear can drive to destruction, but just seeing the community and the people around just embracing indigenous trees, indigenous knowledge a little bit more has been one point of optimism for me. And also seeing the small changes, like when we plant trees from a bare place and then it's covered with beautiful trees, that simple moment is very encouraging and keeps me going. Yeah.
Yes, for me, I know it can be very challenging to remain hopeful, especially with the magnitude of destruction that is ongoing. But what keeps me going and what should keep you going as well is just trying to celebrate the small wins. For example, today what we have here, just trying to look at the positive side of it. Yeah. So we have people who are like-minded, or they want the same thing. Even if we are doing different things, the end goal is the same. So for me, I normally like to celebrate the tiny, small wins, understanding that the action I do, the action you do, whether it's collecting that plastic somewhere and putting it in the right place, just celebrate it. That's the mindset we should have.
Yeah, I think I agree with everyone. Awareness, like seeing awareness being raised and people actually becoming more and more cognizant of the problem is a big one that gives me hope. And then secondly is what Norbert was saying, biodiversity, just how quickly it can actually spring back. If you give it space and time, it actually works. And there are ways to help boost it, especially if you want it quicker, if you have less time. And it's been very fun experimenting with that at the nursery that we started with Green Heart of Kenya, and various methods to try and give it really a boost without like shortcuts, without chemicals and stuff like that, but just trying to mimic nature more, and how that actually kickstarts the processes, and nature just comes back and then takes over. So that really, so a bit of effort and a bit of time, and actually we can do this.
Okay, so super quickly, because we need to give the audience a few questions before we move on to the next session. But if there was kind of a takeaway for the audience that they could go and act on what we've been saying, what do you think it would be?
What act people? Yeah, to me, coming from thinking a lot about timber and products, just ask yourself more often where is stuff coming from. Don't take wood, don't take timber for granted. It is coming from somewhere, and just try and think, where was that sourced sustainably? Where does it come from? Like, you see a beautiful piece of mahogany furniture, and just ask yourself, is the tree that gave that timber gonna grow back, or is it not? And if the answer is no, then it's, however beautiful that piece of furniture is, if time it will be thrown, and that's just not sustainable. So just don't take ecosystems for granted, don't take sawn timber for granted.
Neem furniture, everyone. Neem. Cut them all down. Okay. Questions from the audience. Are there any? Oh, hello.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Fred. The question I have is, what's the balance? You're already conserving the environment. And I think one of the panelists, either Caroline or Winkett, was mentioning about how the community needs to support itself. They have to harvest the trees for economic purpose. So what is the balance, as much as you are conserving, what is the balance with the conservation versus harvesting? Because I don't want to sit on a bench or a couch and think I'm seated on a harvested tree and I didn't plant a tree yesterday. So what is the balance going forward? Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's a difficult one, but I would say it all comes down to sustainability. So talking about the local communities, what needs to be done is introducing sustainable means of livelihood. There is always an option. So for example, if it's about timber, we have very good indigenous tree species that can be a better alternative for the exotics, which sometimes can also be invasive. So for me, it's just embracing the sustainable practices.
Just to add on to what she has said, yes, it is possible to, it's not easy, but it's possible to find a balance. And this is by selecting the type of trees that you grow. And Mateo mentioned there's a place for exotic, but she's also indicated that there are indigenous trees also which grow fast. And this is the other thing which we have to change our minds about. You know, we've been saying for generations that indigenous trees don't grow fast enough. They're very slow. You plant one, and by the time you leave, you take off to the other world, it's still growing. But actually, there are indigenous trees which grow very fast. And what people need to learn is how to grow them, how to produce them, how to harvest them and grow new ones. So I think that is quite an important point about fast-growing indigenous trees. So indigenous trees can be part of that livelihood balance.
Thanks for the question. Can we have one more question? George.
Okay, my name is... I would like to ask, why are trees harvested? What's the main reason they're harvested? And how can we help that they don't get harvested in the future so that there's space for them to grow back?
Well, from my point of view, the reason why many trees are harvested changes depending with the place. So, for instance, if you go to the Dzikunze, Mwangea area, the main reason why trees are harvested, including the tree stumps, it is for charcoal production. And the reason why they harvest for charcoal production, it is to fend for their families. So if you go there, not much agriculture is done because they hardly even receive any rain, which is a ripple effect of cutting down trees over the years. And all this charcoal comes into town and it goes into our different homes in one way or another. So that is one of the main reasons trees are cut. For the mangrove forest, many of the trees are cut for building poles, and you'll find them even in hardwares. In the mangrove trees from the Lamu area, people are allowed to harvest certain regions. However, if we are honestly speaking, many of these trees are not harvested sustainably and not from those areas. So they're harvested in our creeks. You'll find in the evening a fisherman with his dhow full of mangrove poles, and they'll be bought to a hardware. And because of our lack of knowledge, you'll be like, these ones must have come from that area that is allowed and they're being sustainably harvested, and you buy one for your construction needs. So the second part of the solution. Well, regulation without banning, because I think since there was a declaration of the ban of charcoal, is it banned? I think it's in 2020. That's when charcoal production went high. And the people who used to produce charcoal, kind of, not very sustainably, but kind of sustainably, sold their pickups, bought motorbikes because they are able to dodge the police easily. So I think with regulations and giving user rights to CFA so that they are able to control how, if it's charcoal, how it's produced, because we need it in our homes. Especially for a Kenyan, I'm Kenyan, and for githeri, you don't boil it on a gas stove. You have to boil it on a charcoal stove so that it cooks slowly, because we tend to believe it tastes better when it's slowly cooked for a long time. Anyway, so it's all about sustainability and regulation. Yes.
Yes. Why do we harvest? We harvest to meet our basic needs. For example, the benches that we're all sitting on here, fortunately, most of them seem to be from exotic timber, the ones you're sitting on. So, but there can also be for other types of timber. So what do we do about this? Is just to, and this is where experts like Mateo come in, is to tell us how to maximize, how do you maximize production? How do you grow indigenous trees and other types of trees so that they produce the highest amount of timber available?
Yeah, we have overrun, so we're going to stop there. I hope you've all found that absolutely riveting. Thanks, panelists, and thanks everyone for listening.